Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time, not just to a different place, but to a different palate. We are going to explore what the mighty Aztecs ate, long before their most famous ingredient, cacao, was turned into the sweet chocolate bars we know and love. Forget the candy aisle. This is a world where chocolate was a bitter, spicy, and foamy energy drink, often reserved for the elite. Frankly, you might not have even been allowed to drink it. It is a journey into a complex, sophisticated, and sometimes surprising menu. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, I would love to see where you are tuning in from. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice is the sound. It is not the rumble of traffic or the distant wail of a siren. It is a gentle, rhythmic clapping of water, a constant, soft whisper against stone and wood. You are waking up, and the world around you is still draped in the cool, gray veil of Prud'homme. You swing your legs from your reed mat bed, the woven fibers cool against your skin, and walk to the opening of your small, whitewashed adobe hung. A soft, clean mist hangs low over the water, blurring the line between the lake and the sky. Through it, you can just make out the immense, dark silhouettes of the volcanoes that guard this valley, their peaks still holding the last of the night's shadows. This is your city, Tenochtitlan. And it is not on land. Not really. It is a metropolis built on an island, right in the middle of a vast lake Texcoco. A city of canals instead of roads, of canoes instead of carts. As the sun begins its slow climb, its first rays catch the highest points of the city, and you see them ignite in the distance. The twin temples of the Temple Omeir, the great pyramid at the heart of everything, its peak now glowing a faint rose gold. You live in a world woven from water, stone, and faith. You stretch, and the air you breathe is different. It smells damp, earthy, and clean. There is a hint of wood smoke from the thousands of hearths beginning to stir for the morning meal, and the faint, almost sweet scent of blooming flowers from the small gardens and pots that adorn every rooftop and walkway. You notice something else, or rather, the lack of something. Filth. For a city this size, it is remarkably clean. There are no piles of refuse in the corners, no foul stenches hanging in the air. This is a point of civic pride. Later in the day, you will see dedicated crews sweeping the wide public plazas and walkways, and canoes whose sole purpose is to collect waste, which is then carefully transported to be used as fertilizer. It is a system of sanitation so effective it would leave European cities of the same era in absolute shame. How many people share this waking moment with you? 200,000, maybe 300,000. The truth is, no one knows for sure. The sheer scale of Tenochtitlan was staggering, larger than any contemporary city in Spain. Historians still argue over the numbers, poring over Spanish accounts, which were often prone to exaggeration, and archaeological surveys, trying to piece together a definitive census for this sprawling water world. To you, it just feels like home, a place of immense energy, currently holding its breath before the day truly begins. From your vantage point, you can see the three great causeways, massive earthen bridges stretching for miles, connecting your island city to the shores of the mainland. They are the arteries of the empire, and soon they will be thronged with merchants, messengers, and tribute bearers, all flowing towards the heart. But right now, they are quiet, majestic lines drawn across the shimmering water. You hear the first real sounds of the city's industry now. Not a machine, but a sound of life itself, a rhythmic, percussive slap, slap, slap. It is a sound you have heard every single morning of your life. It is the sound of your neighbors, your mother, your aunts, already at work, patting corn dough into the thin, perfect circles that will become the day's bread. Your gaze drifts past the city's edge, out over the lake itself, and you see them. Dotted across the water's surface are strange, rectangular green islands, perfect grids of vibrant vegetation that seem to float upon the water. They are lush, impossible green against the blue of the lake, crisscrossed by narrow channels where small canoes glide silently. These are not natural islands. They are man-made, woven from mudden reeds and willow branches, yet they are bursting with life. They are the promise of the day's first meal, and the secret to how a city this massive, in the middle of a lake, can possibly feed itself. You step into a canoe. It is a xocolātl, a simple dugout, hollowed from a single, massive log. It feels alive beneath your feet, a little unsteady at first, but you find your balance as a family member pushes off from the small stone dock of your home. The paddle dips into the water with a quiet plop, and you glide silently into the maze of canals that serves as your neighborhood streets. Other canoes are beginning to emerge now, small family vessels on their way to the morning's work, their movements graceful and practiced. You pass under a small, arched wooden bridge, and a woman, carrying a basket of bright flowers, smiles and nods at you. Your destination is those green rectangles you saw from your window, the chinampas. As your canoe leaves the residential district behind, the canals widen, and the city as hum fades, replaced by the chirping of birds and the low buzz of insects. You are entering the city as pantry. You pull alongside one of these floating gardens, and now you can see it up close. It is not just a patch of green. It is an absolute marvel of engineering. Think of it as a giant, living raft, a masterpiece of sustainable agriculture. The foundation is a woven mat of reeds, branches, and other sturdy water plants, creating a massive, rectangular frame. To keep this buoyant bed from simply floating away, the builders planted willows at the corners and along the sides. These trees, which love water, grow quickly, their roots reaching down through the raft and anchoring it firmly into the lake bed below. They become living pillars, holding the garden in place. Then comes the magic ingredient. From a larger canoe, workers use long scoops to dredge up the rich, dark, nutrient-packed mud from the bottom of the lake. This is not just dirt. It is centuries of decomposed organic matter, a super fertilizer more potent than anything a farmer on dry land could hope for. They pile this incredible mud onto the reed frame, layer after layer, until it rises a few feet above the water level. The result is a gardener's dream. The Aztec Empire is constantly irrigated from below, as the plant's roots can wick up water from the surrounding canal. It is also perpetually fertilized by the rich mud it is made of. This creates an environment of almost unbelievable fertility. Here, crops do not just grow, they explode with life. You see neat rows of vibrant green maize stalks, climbing bean vines wrapping around them for support, and broad-leafed squash plants spreading across the ground. They are large, yellow blossoms like fallen stars. You see tomato plants heavy with fruit, and the fiery jewels of chili peppers dangling from their stems. Just how productive were these gardens? This is a question that makes agricultural historians get very excited. The conditions were so perfect. Constant water, incredible soil, and a frost-free climate, that some scholars, reading the enthusiastic Spanish accounts, believe the Aztecs could pull off an astonishing 7 different harvests a year from a single Aztec Empire. Imagine that. Planting and harvesting, in a constant, year-round cycle. Other, perhaps more cautious archaeologists, suggest this might be an overstatement, an ideal rather than the everyday reality. They argue that while the chinampas were phenomenally productive, maybe 3 or 4 harvests were more the norm. The debate is a fascinating one, a testament to just how incredible this system was, that even the more conservative estimates are still deeply impressive. As you watch a farmer tending to his plot, you notice him doing something curious. He is not scattering seeds. He is planting tiny, perfect cubes of dark mud, each with a little green sprout already emerging from it. This is a brilliant bit of Aztec ingenuity. Before planting on the main China Empire, farmers would create a special seedling bed, a sort of plant nursery, out of particularly fine mud. They would press seeds into this mud and let them germinate in a protected space. Once the seedlings were strong enough, they would be cut out, mud and all, into these small blocks and transplanted to the main garden. This gave the plants a huge head start and ensured a much higher survival rate. It is the ancient equivalent of a modern peat pellet, a small detail that reveals an incredible level of horticultural sophistication. Your family's task is to gather what is needed for the next few days. You carefully pluck tender squash blossoms, select a few ripe squashes, and gather a bundle of beans. The air is thick with the smell of chlorophyll and damp earth. The sun is higher in the sky now, burning off the last of the mist and turning the water in the canals to a sheet of shimmering gold. Your canoe, once empty, is now low in the water, laden with the day's fresh, vibrant bounty. With the work done, you push off once more, leaving the quiet green gardens behind and gliding back towards the heart of the city, which is now fully awakened, humming with the energy of hundreds of thousands of lives. The food for the people is secure. Back in your family's courtyard, the bounty from the China Empire is laid out on a clean woven mat. The sight is so common, so fundamental to your existence, that you might not even think about it. But what you are looking at is the foundation of your entire civilization. It is a trinity of life, a sacred trio of plants so perfectly intertwined that they support not just each other, but your entire people. You call them the Three Sisters. The first and most important sister is maize. Corn. Not the sweet, plump yellow cobs you might imagine today. This is a hardier, more varied ancestor. The kernels come in a rainbow of colors: deep blue, blood red, pearly white, and speckled yellow. Each variety has its own purpose, its own texture, its own soul. It is the undisputed queen, the stalk that stands tall and provides the structure for the others. It is the carbohydrate, the energy, the very grain of life. Without maize, there would be no Tenochtitlan. The second sister is a bean. You have dozens of varieties in baskets around your home. Black beans, pinto beans, red beans. In the china pans, you saw their vines, elegant and tenacious, climbing the sturdy maize stalks. This is not a coincidence. It is a partnership perfected over thousands of years. The maize provides the pole, a living trellis for the beans to spiral towards the sun. In return, the beans perform a subtle, underground magic. They are nitrogen fixers. They pull nitrogen from the air, something maize cannot do, and convert it into a usable form in the soil, enriching it and helping to feed the very plant that supports them. Nutritionally, they are the perfect partner, providing the dense protein that a diet heavy in maize would otherwise lack. The third and final sister is the squash. Sprawling low to the ground, its broad, almost prickly leaves act as a living mulch. They shade the soil, keeping it cool and moist and preventing pesky weeds from getting a foothold and competing for resources. Its large, umbrella-like leaves protect its two sisters from the harshest sun and create a microclimate that benefits the entire plot. In return for its work, it gets to thrive in the nutrient-rich, well-structured soil created by its siblings. Nutritionally, it offers a different kind of wealth: vitamins, minerals, and healthy oils from its seeds. This is not just a clever farming technique, it is a complete, symbiotic ecosystem. When grown together, the three sisters produce a far greater yield than if each were planted in a separate plot. They enrich the soil, support each other's growth, and create a resilient, self-sustaining garden. It is a system so brilliant that modern agronomists still study it as a prime example of companion planting. The Aztecs did not have scientific journals or research papers to figure this out. They learned it through generations of careful observation, of listening to the land, of understanding the subtle relationships between the plants that gave them life. There is a fascinating, though perhaps less glamorous, fourth sister that sometimes joins the party. It is a specific type of fungus called corn smut, or xocolātl. To an outsider, it looks like a disaster, grotesque, gray-black, tumor-like growths that erupt on the corn cobs, distorting the kernels. A European farmer would see it as a disease, a blight to be eradicated. But you see it as a delicacy. When harvested young, this fungus is a culinary treasure. It has a unique, smoky, earthy flavor, somewhere between a mushroom and sweet corn. Sautéed with onions and chiles, it becomes a savory filling for tamales or a topping for tortillas. To you, it is not a pest. It is an unexpected gift from the gods of rain and earth, a bonus harvest. The fact that the Aztecs embraced this fungus, while others saw it as a plague, speaks volumes about their deep, experimental, and waste-nothing approach to food. But did every single Aztec farmer, in every corner of the empire, plant in this exact configuration? That is where things get a bit more complex. While the Three Sisters system was the ideal, especially in the fertile Central Valley, agricultural practices varied hugely across the vast empire. Some historians argue that in drier, rockier regions, or in areas with different soil types, farmers would have adapted, perhaps planting only maize and beans, or using different local plants as companions. The Three Sisters was more of a perfect model, a sacred concept, than a rigid, universal law. The reality was likely a patchwork of diverse and locally adapted farming techniques, all stemming from the same core understanding of cooperation. You watch as your mother picks up a handful of dried corn kernels. They feel hard as pebbles in her hand. They are the potential for a meal, but not yet. There is a crucial, almost magical step that must happen first. A process that will transform this hard, almost indigestible grain into the soft, nutritious dough that will form the basis of nearly every meal you eat. The sun is getting warmer, and the heart of the day is approaching. The real work is about to begin. You follow your mother to the hearth, the bubbling, beating heart of the home. It is a simple setup, a carefully controlled fire on a raised platform, with clay pots and a large, flat ceramic griddle called a como resting nearby. She takes a heavy clay pot and scoops in a generous amount of those hard, dry maize kernels. This is not just food, it is a direct connection to the divine. You have been taught this since you could walk. According to the stories, the gods tried to create humanity several times. Their first attempts were failures. They made people from clay, but they were weak and dissolved in the rain. They tried making them from wood, but these people were rigid, heartless, and had no memory of their creators. Finally, in a moment of supreme inspiration, the gods ground up yellow and white corn, mixed it with their own blood, and from this sacred dough, they formed the first true humans. Your flesh is literally made of maize. Your bones are maize. To waste a single kernel is not just careless, it is a profound act of disrespect to the very gods who made you. This belief permeates every corner of your culture. There is a god for the young, tender corn, another for the mature, ripe cobs, and a goddess who presides over the harvest. When you plant a seed, you are entrusting a piece of life to the earth. When you harvest the cob, you are receiving a gift. This reverence dictates how you handle the grain. If you drop a few kernels on the ground, you do not just sweep them away. You painstakingly pick them up, perhaps even whispering an apology to the grain for having mishandled it. This deep, spiritual connection to corn is something the Spanish, with their focus on wheat for the communion wafer, would later find both puzzling and profound. Your mother adds water to the pot of kernels. Then she does something that seems counterintuitive. She reaches for a small bowl filled with a white, powdery substance. It is lime, not the green fruit, put calcium hydroxide. Yes, essentially, she adds a careful amount to the pot. This is the first step in a process of chemical and culinary alchemy, a technique that is arguably one of the most important food science discoveries in human history. Without it, the great civilizations of the Americas, from the Maya to the Aztec, might never have existed. You see, dry maize, in its natural state, has a major nutritional flaw. It is rich in niacin, vitamin B3, but it is chemically bound, meaning your body cannot absorb it. A population that relies heavily on untreated corn will eventually suffer from a devastating disease called pellagra, which causes terrible skin sores, dementia, and eventually, death. The ancient peoples of the Americas figured something out. They discovered that by soaking and gently cooking the corn in an alkaline solution, like water mixed with wood ash or powdered limestone, something incredible happens. This process, which you know simply as preparing the corn, is called nixtamalization. The alkaline bath breaks down the tough outer hull of the kernel, making it easier to grind. But more importantly, it chemically transforms the corn. It unlocks that bound niacin, making it available for your body to absorb. It also boosts the calcium content and even improves the balance of amino acids, making the protein more complete. It turns a humble grain into a superfood. How they discovered this is one of history's great mysteries. There was no laboratory, no understanding of vitamins or amino acids. It was likely a very, very slow process of trial and error over thousands of years. Perhaps someone noticed that corn cooked in a pot with residual campfire ash tasted better and was easier to grind. Maybe they noticed that communities that prepared their corn this way were healthier. However it happened, it was a discovery that fueled empires. There is another, stranger use for corn in your world, one that has nothing to do with food. The dried cobs, once the kernels have been removed, are sometimes used for a purpose that is a bit indelicate. In some parts of the empire, the rough, textured surface of a corn cob made for a surprisingly effective, if somewhat rustic, tool for personal hygiene after visiting the latrine. It is a small, earthy detail of daily life that rarely makes it into the grand historical texts, but is a reminder that everyday problems require practical solutions, even in a mighty empire. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was, but the archaeological and anthropological evidence suggests it was certainly one of the many uses for this incredibly versatile plant. The corn kernels are now simmering gently in the lime water. The pot will not be boiled vigorously. A slow, patient heat is all that is needed. The air begins to fill with a distinctive, clean, and slightly chalky aroma. It is the smell of transformation. The hard pebbles are slowly softening, their skins loosening, their nutritional secrets being unlocked. This pot of simmering maize is the promise of tortillas, of tamales, of it all. It is the first, essential step towards almost every meal you will eat. It is the quiet, daily miracle that keeps you and your world alive. The simmering stops. The pot is taken off the heat and left to steep, allowing the alkaline solution to work its slow magic overnight. Now it is the next morning. The corn, which you call nixtamal, is transformed. The kernels are plump, soft, and their tough outer skins slip off easily between your fingers. The first task of the day is to wash the nixtamal thoroughly, rinsing away the lime water and the detached hulls, leaving behind the pure, softened heart of the grain. Now comes the hard part, the work that defines the soundscape of your morning. You kneel on a woven mat in front of a metate, one of the most essential tools in your household. It is a slab of volcanic stone, carefully shaped, with a slight dip in the middle, worn smooth by generations of use. It has 3 short, sturdy legs, tilting it at the perfect angle. In your hands, you hold the motto, a stone rolling pin, also carved from basalt, that fits perfectly into the curve of the metate. This is your blender, your food processor, your mill. It is powered by you. You take a handful of the wet nixtammal and place it on the meaty. Then, you begin to grind. You lean into it, using your body weight, pushing the mano down and away from you, crushing the soft kernels against the stone slab. It is a rhythmic, repetitive motion. Grind, scrape the resulting paste back to the center, add a little more water, and grind again. It is physically demanding work. Your shoulders and back will ache, but your muscles are strong from years of this daily ritual. This is women's work, a task passed down from mother to daughter. The sound of dozens of manos grinding on meat echoes through the neighborhood, a chorus of domestic labor. The goal is to create a smooth, pliable dough, which you call masa. At first, the ground corn is gritty, but with continued effort and the slow addition of water, it transforms into a soft, fragrant, and slightly springy paste. The texture has to be perfect. Too dry, and the tortilla will crack. Too wet, and it will stick to everything. Getting it right is an art form, a skill honed over a lifetime. This entire process, from cooking the corn in line to grinding it into masa, is the magic of nixtamalization made visible. But for all its importance, it is a piece of history that was almost completely overlooked by the Spanish conquest authors. When they wrote their reports back to Spain, they described the tortillas and tamales, but they did not seem to notice or understand the crucial preparation process. They saw the grinding, of course, but they missed the chemical significance of the lime bath. For centuries, Europeans tried to cultivate maize as a staple food with disastrous results. They planted vast fields of it, but because they did not nixtamalize it, populations that came to depend on it were ravaged by pellagra. It is a tragic irony of history. The secret to corn's success was right in front of them, but they did not see it. How did the Aztecs get their lime? This was not something you could just dig up. It required its own industrial process. In areas with limestone deposits, they would quarry the rock, break it into chunks, and then heat it in large kilns. This intense heat would drive off the carbon dioxide, transforming limestone, calcium carbonate, into quicklime, calcium oxide. This was a dangerous, caustic material. To make it safe for cooking, it had to be slaked by carefully adding water, which resulted in the stable, powdered calcium hydroxide you use in your kitchen. It was a sophisticated bit of chemistry, another layer of scientific understanding hidden within your daily meal. Archaeologists and anthropologists still have lively debates about the origins of this incredible technology. When and where did the first people discover nixtamalization? The current consensus points to southern Mexico or Guatemala, sometime between 1500 and 1200 BC. But the exact how is a mystery. Did it originate from a single group and spread? Or did different cultures discover it independently? Some researchers analyze the mineral residue on ancient pottery shards, looking for traces of lime to map the spread of the technique. Others study the wear patterns on ancient meats to understand how the process was refined. It is a puzzle with pieces scattered across thousands of years and miles, a testament to the ingenuity of the ancient Americas. Finally, the masa is ready. A large, smooth, pale yellow ball of dough sits in a clay bowl, smelling faintly of corn and wet stone. It is a blank canvas, the starting point for a dozen different dishes. It is the result of hours of labor, a deep understanding of plant biology, and a dash of brilliant, practical chemistry. Now, with the sun climbing higher in the sky, it is time to turn this dough into bread. With the smooth ball of masha ready, the next stage of the morning ritual begins. The cama, the flat, circular clay griddle, is already sitting on the hearth, absorbing the heat from the low fire. It needs to be hot, but not too hot. Another element of cooking that is learned through feel rather than measurement. A thin layer of lime is often wiped across its surface to prevent sticking. a testament to the versatility of that magical white powder. Your mother takes a small bowl of masa, about the size of a fig. She dips her hands in a bowl of water to keep the dough from sticking, and then the magic happens. She begins to pat. It is a blur of motion, a rhythmic slap, slap, slap of her palms, turning the ball of dough in a steady rotation. With each pat, the bowl flattens, spreads, and thins into a perfect, uniform circle. It is a skill of incredible dexterity. There is no rolling pin, no press, just the practiced percussion of her hands. The sound is so distinctive, so much a part of the daily soundscape, that a man returning from the fields or the market could tell he was close to home just by hearing it. Once the circle, now a Tlatelolco, what the Spanish will later rename the tortilla, is perfectly thin, she gently lifts it and lays it flat on the hot coal. It sizzles softly. After a minute or so, the edges begin to dry and curl slightly. With nimble fingers, she flips it. The other side cooks, and then comes the crucial moment. She flips it one last time, and as the trapped steam inside expands, the tortilla puffs up like a pillow. This is the sign of a perfectly made tortilla. Once puffed, it is quickly removed and placed in a folded cloth inside a woven basket, where it will stay warm and soft, waiting for the meal. The process repeats, one after another, a steady production line of one. But tortillas are not the only thing made from this versatile dough. For a more substantial, more festive meal, you prepare tamales. This is often a more communal activity, with several women gathering to form an assembly line. The masa for tamales is a bit different. It is often mixed with a little bit of lard, though before the Spanish brought pigs, this would have been other sources of fat, and whipped to be lighter and fluffier. A portion of this enriched masa is spread onto a softened corn husk, which has been soaked in water to make it pliable. Then comes the filling. This is where the creativity of the Aztec kitchen shines. It could be shredded turkey meat simmered in a chili sauce, or a simple mixture of beans and herbs. It could be those savory, smoky xocolātl mushrooms, or perhaps tiny, flavorful fish from the lake. For a sweet version, the masa might be mixed with honey or agave nectar and filled with chopped fruit. Once the filling is in place, the corn husk is folded and tied, creating a neat little packet. These packets are then carefully arranged in a large, deep clay pot with a little water at the bottom, standing upright so they do not get soggy. The pot is covered, and the tamales are left to steam for an hour or more. The result is a wonderfully comforting meal, a pillow of soft, savory corn dough surrounding a delicious surprise, all infused with the subtle, earthy flavor of the corn husk rather. Here is a small detail you might miss. The corn husks themselves carry a kind of secret language. The way a tamale is tied, with a simple knot, a double fold, or a strip of husk tied around the middle, could sometimes signify what was inside. A particular knot might mean it is a bean tamale, while a different fold could signal a spicy turkey filling. It was a practical system for a kitchen producing many different kinds at once. Some food historians debate whether this was a standardized system or just a matter of family habit, but it is a fascinating glimpse into the silent communication of the Aztec kitchen. The sheer variety of these foods is something historians are still piecing together. Spanish chroniclers like Bernardino de Sahagun, a friar who meticulously documented Aztec life, were astonished by the diversity they encountered. He described tortillas of different sizes, thicknesses, and colors, some folded, some rolled, some eaten fresh and hot, others left to dry and eaten later like crackers. He wrote of tamales filled with everything imaginable, from frogs and gophers to turkey eggs and squash blossoms. The conventional view of the Aztec diet as monotonous is a complete misunderstanding. The reality, as chronicled by Sahagun and supported by archaeological evidence, was a cuisine of immense variety and sophistication, all built upon that one foundational ingredient, maize. As you sit down for the morning meal, You take a warm tortilla from the basket. You might use it as a spoon to scoop up some beans, or wrap it around a piece of roasted chili. It is simple, perfect, and deeply satisfying. It is the bread of your people, the product of the china pans, the gift of the gods, and the loving, rhythmic labor of the women in your family. The morning meal is simple and nourishing, but it is not always solid. Sometimes, especially on a cool morning or when you are feeling under the weather, you will have something warm and comforting to drink. Not a thin broth, but something thick, substantial, and deeply satisfying. This is at all, and it is as fundamental to your diet as the tortilla itself. The base, unsurprisingly, is masa. The same corn dough that you just saw being patted into tortillas is the starting point. A lump of the fresh masa is dissolved in water, stirred vigorously in a clay pot over a low fire. As it heats, the starches in the corn begin to swell in gelatin, and the liquid thickens into a smooth, raw, and comforting gruel. In its purest form, it has a gentle, clean corn flavor. It is the kind of food you would give to a baby, or to an elder who has trouble chewing. It is nourishing, easy to digest, and feels like a warm hug from the inside. But plain at all is just the beginning. It is a blank canvas for a universe of flavors. The most common addition is a sweetener. You might stir in a spoonful of thick, dark agave nectar, or the rich, floral honey gathered from native stingles bees. This transforms it into a breakfast drink, a sweet and hearty way to start the day. For a more complex flavor, you might add a pinch of cinnamon or a precious vanilla bean, infusing the drink with its fragrant perfume. The variations are endless and regional. In some parts of the empire, they make a version called xocolātl, a savory and spicy concoction. To the base of masa and water, they add ground chili peppers, giving it a vibrant kick of heat. Then they might throw in some tender corn kernels, a sprig of the pungent herby piezo, and perhaps some shredded turkey or other meat. This turns it from a simple drink into a complete, hearty stew in a cup, a perfect meal for a cold evening. Then there is the version that connects back to the grandest ingredient of all. You can take your basic kettle and add ground, toasted cacao beans. This creates a drink that is thick, slightly bitter, and incredibly energizing. It is a sort of proto-hot chocolate, but thicker and more porridge-like than the frothy, elite drink of the nobles. This was a more accessible way for common people to get a taste of the prized cacao. There is a strange and fascinating variant of it all that hints at the Aztecs' experimental, waste-nothing philosophy. It was called an equituel. The key ingredient here was xocolātl, or pulq, the fermented, alcoholic syrup of the mighty plant. They would mix this milky, slightly sour alcoholic beverage with the atol base and sweeten it, usually with agave nectar. The result would be a thick, sweet, and intoxicating corn drink. This raises some interesting questions for food historians. Was this a celebratory drink, a ritual beverage, or just a way to use up leftover pulq? The Spanish chroniclers who recorded it seemed a bit scandalized by the idea of a warm, alcoholic porridge, and details are scarce. It is one of those culinary corners of the Aztec world that we only have intriguing glimpses of, a recipe that blurs the line between food, drink, and intoxicant. The debate among historians often revolves around just how common these different atols were. Was the sweet, flavored at all an everyday treat or something reserved for special occasions? Was the savory chili atol a staple meal in some regions and completely unknown in others? The writings of Sahagan list an incredible number of atol varieties, suggesting a rich and diverse tradition. But archaeology has a harder time confirming this. It is difficult to tell from a residue on a pot shard whether the atol inside was flavored with chili, honey, or vanilla. So we are left with tantalizing descriptions and the ongoing work of researchers trying to match the written record with physical evidence. As you sip your warm, sweet atol from a simple clay cup, You feel its warmth spread through your chest. It is a taste of home, a taste of comfort. It represents the incredible versatility of maize. The same grain that can be flattened into a utensil, steamed into a savory cake, can also be transformed into this soothing, nourishing drink. It is a testament to the culinary ingenuity of your people, who learned to coax 1,000 different forms and flavors from the single, sacred gift of the gods. The day is still young, and there is more to the Aztec pantry than just corn. The other sisters are waiting. After the comforting warmth of it all, your attention turns to the other baskets in the corner of your home. They are filled with the second of the three sisters, beans. They might seem humble next to the divine status of maize, but in the grand nutritional architecture of your diet, they are an absolutely essential pillar. Without them, your civilization, built on the energy of corn, would lack the strength to sustain itself. You run your hands through a basket of dried black beans. They are small, shiny, and cool to the touch, like river pebbles. The variety is astonishing. Besides the familiar black and pinto beans, there are red beans, white beans, speckled deepari beans that are incredibly drought-resistant, and large, meaty-coat beans. Each has a slightly different flavor, texture, and cooking time. This diversity is not accidental. It is the result of millennia of careful cultivation, selecting for traits that would allow beans to thrive in the varied climates of the empire, from the humid lowlands to the arid highlands. The primary role of beans in your diet is to provide protein. While maize gives you the energy to work, beans provide the building blocks for your muscles and bodies. The combination of corn and beans together creates a complete protein, meaning that between them, they provide all the essential amino acids your body needs. It is a synergy that modern nutritionists praise, but that you know simply as the food that makes you feel strong. It is the reason your people could build massive pyramids and sprawling cities on a diet that contained relatively little meat. Preparation is simple but requires patience. The dried beans are first picked over, removing any small stones or debris. Then, they are soaked in water for several hours, or overnight, which softens them and reduces the cooking time. After soaking, they are drained and put in a deep clay pot with fresh water, which is then set on the hearth to simmer for a long time. The key is a slow, gentle heat. A rolling boil will cause the beans to break apart and turn to mush. The most common way to eat them is simply as frijoles de la olla, or pot beans. Once they are tender, seasoned with a little salt, they are a meal in themselves, often served in a bowl with a side of tortillas for scooping. Or they might be mashed into a thick paste, what will one day be known as refried beans, though in your time, they are fried only once, in a little bit of fat if it is available, not refried. This paste becomes a perfect spread for tortillas or a filling for tamales and other masa-based creations. But beans were not just a food for the common people. A fascinating dish mentioned in the old codices was called Tlatelolco, or White Lord's food. It was a special dish prepared for the Aztec nobility, especially during certain ceremonies. It consisted of pristine white beans, carefully cooked and mashed, then mixed with white corn flour and possibly other white ingredients to create a dish of pure, symbolic whiteness. The exact recipe is lost to time, and historians debate its full significance. Was the color meant to represent purity, high status, or connection to a specific deity? It is a reminder that even the humblest ingredient, like a bean, could be elevated to a dish of deep ritual and political importance in the Aztec court. Here is a curious detail about bean cookery in your world, the role of the herb piasot. You will almost always see a sprig of this pungent, jagged leaf herb thrown into the pot of simmering beans. It has a strong, unique flavor that some people describe as being like resin or turpentine. It is definitely an acquired taste, but it is not just there for flavor. Your ancestors discover, through generations of observation, that adding EPSO to the pot has a very practical, if slightly indelicate, effect. It reduces the gas-producing properties of the beans, making them easier to digest. Modern science has since confirmed that the compounds in EPSO do indeed have carminative, anti-gas properties. It is another example of the sophisticated folk science embedded in your traditional cooking. The exact origin of bean domestication is a subject of intense academic debate. For a long time, it was thought that beans were domesticated once in a single location in Mesoamerica and then spread from there. However, recent genetic studies have turned this idea on its head. The evidence now suggests that the common bean, Phaseolus vulgaris, was actually domesticated independently in at least 2 different places, once in Mesoamerica, the ancestor of most of the beans you eat, and the second, separate time far to the south, in the Andes Mountains of what is now Peru. This multiple origin theory has forced historians and archaeologists to rethink the ancient networks of trade and agricultural innovation across the Americas. You scoop a portion of the tender, savory black beans into a small clay bowl. They are rich, earthy, and satisfying. They are the quiet, reliable partner to maize, the dependable second sister who ensures the health and strength of your people. As you eat, you can already imagine the final part of the trinity, the sprawling, vibrant plant that completes the sacred garden in your plate. The final member of the sacred trio lies on the mat, a splash of vibrant color against the earthy tones of your home. It is the squash, the third sister, but to simply call it squash is to do it a great disservice. You have a dozen different words for the varieties that grow in the china pans and fields, each with its unique shape, color, and culinary purpose. There are long, pale green squashes, small, round, dark green ones, and large, warty, orange-fleshed varieties that are kept in storage for the leaner months. Unlike the tall, upright maize and the climbing beans, the squash is a creature of the ground. Its sprawling vines and huge leaves create a living carpet, as you saw in the China MPA. This is not just a plant, it is an entire microenvironment. Today, your family has harvested a few of the tender, summer squashes. Their preparation is simple. They can be chopped and steamed until tender, or roasted over the embers of the fire, which gives them a sweet, smoky flavor. They add moisture, vitamins, and a different texture to a meal that might be dominated by the grain of maize and the density of beans. But your people's relationship with the squash is far more intimate and resourceful than just eating the flesh. Nothing is wasted. You look at the pile of bright, golden yellow flowers that were also gathered this morning. These are the squash blossoms, xocolātl. To you, they are not just a decorative part of the plant, they are a delicacy. Delicate and ephemeral, they must be used the day they are picked. They have a subtle, slightly sweet, and floral flavor. A common way to prepare them is to chop them up and sauté them with a little onion and chili. This mixture then becomes a divine filling for a quesadilla, though your version uses a folded tortilla and local cheese, or is perhaps just the filling itself, or is stirred into a soup at the last minute. And then there are the seeds. When you cut open a larger, mature squash, you do not just scoop out the seeds and toss them away. That would be unthinkable. The seeds, which you call pepitas, are a concentrated source of precious oils and protein. They are meticulously washed and then toasted on a hot comal. As they toast, they puff up and make a soft popping sound, releasing a wonderful, nutty aroma. Once toasted and lightly salted, they are a delicious and addictive snack on their own. But their use goes far beyond that. The toasted seeds are often ground on the meat, just like corn, into a thick, oily paste. This paste is the base for one of the most luxurious and flavorful sauces in your cuisine. You might know it as PPN. This ground pumpkin seed paste is mixed with water or broth, and seasoned with ground chiles, tomatoes, and other spices to create a rich, nutty, and savory sauce that is often served over steamed turkey or vegetables. It is a sauce that showcases a completely different side of the squash, proving that its value extends far beyond its fleshy walls. There is a strange and little-known use for one particular type of squash, the battle gourd, Legionarius sicaroria. This was not typically grown for eating. Its value lay in its hard, woody shell. When mature and dried, these gourds are incredibly durable and waterproof. You can see them all around your world, repurposed into essential household items. A small, round gourd becomes a perfect bowl or a cup. A larger one with a narrow neck becomes a canteen for carrying water. Some are even hollowed out and used as resonators for musical instruments or as ceremonial rattles. This plant, which is technically a squash, provides the very dishes and bottles you use every day. It is a plant that provides its own container. The history of squash in the Americas is incredibly ancient, even older than that of maize and beans. For a long time, archaeologists believed that the three sisters were domesticated together, as a package deal. But more recent findings have shown this is not true. The earliest evidence for domesticated squash in Mexico dates back an astonishing 10,000 years. This means that for thousands of years, ancient hunter-gatherers were cultivating and eating squash long before they settled down into agricultural villages. It was the first of the sisters to be tamed. The question that fascinates archaeologists is, why? One compelling theory is that these early squashes were not cultivated for their flesh, which was often bitter and thin, but for their nutritious or rich seeds. The idea is that the first farmers were seed eaters, and only later did they selectively breed the plants to have the sweet, thick flesh you enjoy today. It is a debate that reframes the entire agricultural revolution in the Americas. You take a piece of roasted squash, its flesh soft and sweet. You sprinkle a few toasted peppers on top for a bit of crunch. In this one bite, you taste the genius of your ancestors, the understanding that a single plant can offer a flower, a fruit, and a seed, each with its own unique gift. With the three sisters united on your plate, the foundation is complete. But a foundation, however strong, is not the whole building. Now it is time for the fireworks, the flavor, the ingredient that gives your food its soul. Now that the foundational elements of your meal are prepared, the tortillas, the beans, the squash, it is time to introduce the soul of your cuisine. It comes in a small, unassuming clay bowl, but its contents are explosive. This is the chili pepper. Without it, your food would be nourishing, but it would be bland. The chili is what gives it life, flavor, and a staggering spectrum of flavor. You look at the variety available in your local market, and it is a kaleidoscope of colors, shapes, and sizes. There are tiny, fiery red peppers, long, dark green ones that are mild and smoky when roasted, and small, lantern-shaped yellow ones with a fruity heat. You do not just have one word for chili. You have dozens. Pasilla, ancho, guajillo, chipotle. Each name represents a unique flavor profile and a specific culinary use. Some are used fresh, chopped finely to add a bright, sharp heat to a salsa. Others are dried, which concentrates and deepens their flavor, making them smoky, sweet, or nutty. Some are even smoked, like the jalapeno, which is smoked over wood fires until it is prune-like and imbued with a deep, rich flavor, at which point you call it a chipotle. The primary sensation of a chili is, of course, heat. This comes from a chemical compound called capsaicin, which tricks the pain receptors in your mouth into thinking they are being burned. To you, this sensation is not just pain. It is pleasure. It is excitement. It is a vital part of what makes food taste good. You have been eating chili since you were a child, building up a tolerance and an appreciation for the subtle differences in their burn. Some chiles have a quick, sharp heat that fades fast. Others have a slow, smoldering burn that builds and lingers. but to focus only on the heat is to miss the point entirely. Underneath the capsaicin kick is a world of complex flavors. The dark, wrinkled ancho chili, which is a dried poblano, has notes of dried fruit, coffee, and licorice. The slender, reddish guajillo has a tender, slightly acidic flavor with hints of green tea. Learning to cook in your world is like learning to be a painter, and the different varieties of chiles are your color palette. You learn which chili to use to create a deep, rich mole sauce, and which to use for a light, fresh salsa to spoon onto a piece of roasted fish. The most common use is in a salsa, not the chunky tomato and onion dip of modern Tex-Mex, but a much purer, more elemental sauce. A classic version would be made in a molcajete, a tripod mortar and pestle carved from volcanic rock. You would toast a few dried chiles and maybe a couple of small, tart tomatillo on the comal until their skins are blistered and their aromas are released. Then, you would grind them in the molcajete with a little coarse salt and a splash of water until you have a smooth, intensely flavored sauce. This salsa would then be used to season everything, from a simple piece of turkey to a humble bowl of beans. Here is a small, slightly bizarre detail about the chili pepper's role in your society. It was not just for eating. It was also a tool for discipline and even a weapon of war. A common punishment for a misbehaving child was to be held over a fire into which chiles were thrown. The acrid, burning smoke would sting their eyes and lungs, a memorable lesson in obedience. In warfare, Aztec warriors sometimes threw chili bombs, pots filled with smoldering, smoking chiles, into enemy ranks to cause confusion and temporarily blind their opponents with the painful smoke. It is a stark reminder that the same plant that brings so much pleasure to the dinner table could be weaponized. The question of why humans are the only mammals that seem to actively enjoy the painful sensation of capsaicin is a fascinating one that scientists and anthropologists continue to explore. One theory, known as the anti-imbricable hypothesis, suggests that the love for spicy food developed in hot climates, because capsaicin has powerful anti-imbricable properties. In a world before refrigeration, adding chili peppers to food would have helped to kill or inhibit the growth of foodborne bacteria, making it safer to eat. People who ate and enjoyed spicy food would have been healthier and less likely to get sick. Over generations, this preference could have become encoded in the culture. Other scholars argue it is more about thrill-seeking, a form of benign masochism where we enjoy the sensation of risk without any real danger, like riding a roller coaster. The debate is ongoing, a deep dive into the psychology and biology of flavor. You take a warm tortilla and dip it into a deep red salsa made from toasted chipotle peppers. The first taste is smoky and rich, followed by a slow, creeping wave of warmth that spreads across your tongue and makes your scalp tingle. It is an invigorating, almost exhilarating feeling. This is the flavor of your land, a spark that ignites the holy trinity of maize, beans, and squash. It is the taste that makes your food uniquely, vibrantly Aztec. With this fiery element in place, you can now consider the centerpiece of a truly special meal. While your daily diet is a beautiful tapestry woven from the threads of the three sisters and the fire of the chili pepper, there are times for celebration, for feasts, for a centerpiece on the table that signifies wealth and occasion. In your world, that centerpiece is not beef, pork, or lamb. Those animals do not exist here. It is the turkey. In your language, you call it the xocolātl. It is a magnificent, if slightly comical, bird. You see them in many household compounds, strutting and gobbling, their iridescent feathers shimmering in the sun. They are the only bird, and indeed one of the very few animals altogether, that your people truly domesticated for food. While you might hunt for deer, rabbits, or wild fowl, the turkey is a reliable, homegrown source of meat. Raising them is a common household activity. They are fed on corn, scraps of food, and whatever insects they can forage, converting this feed into precious protein. They are valued not just for their meat, but also for their eggs, which are a rich and welcome addition to the diet. Their feathers, too, are highly prized. They are woven into luxurious textiles, used to adorn the cloaks of the wealthy and the ceremonial costumes of warriors and priests. A turkey is a walking treasure chest of resources. For a normal family meal, meat is a rarity. But for a wedding, a religious festival, or a celebration of a successful harvest, a turkey will be the star of the show. Preparing it is an all-day affair. The bird is slaughtered, plucked, and cleaned. Then, it is typically simmered or steamed until the meat is tender enough to be easily shredded from the bones. Roasting a whole bird, as we might imagine today, was less common. Simmering was a more fuel-efficient way to cook and ensure that no part of the animal's flavor was lost, as the resulting broth would become the base for a magnificent sauce. This sauce is where the full artistry of your cuisine is displayed. This is the famous mole, or as you would call it, bleu, which simply means sauce or concoction. A mole is not one specific recipe. It is a whole category of complex, blended sauces. The most famous ones involve a symphony of ingredients, sometimes 20 or 30 of them, all meticulously prepared and ground together on the meat into a smooth, harmonious paste. The foundation is almost always a blend of different chiles: ancho for richness, pasilla for depth, chipotle for smoke. These are toasted and soaked. Then, other ingredients are added. Toasted seeds, like the pepitas from the squash, or sesame seeds, which arrived with the Spanish, but you had other native seeds, would be ground in for texture and nutty flavor. Tomatillo or tomatoes would add acidity and brightness. Spices, like the fragrant allspice or a precious vanilla bean, might be included. And for a touch of sweetness and depth, you might add some dried fruit. Everything is ground, then grilled, and ground again, then simmered for hours with the turkey broth, until the flavors meld into something that is more than the sum of its parts. A sauce that is simultaneously spicy, sweet, smoky, and savory. The shredded turkey meat is then added to this glorious sauce and served with hot tortillas. There is a curious and slightly luxurious detail about how turkeys were sometimes raised for the tables of the elite. According to some Spanish accounts, the nobles of Tenochtitlan had turkeys that were force-fed, in a manner similar to how geese are fattened for foie gras in Europe. They were allegedly fed a rich diet, sometimes including masa mixed with ground nuts, to make their meat exceptionally tender and fatty. It is a detail that highlights the social stratification of your world. The difference between a household turkey raised on scraps and a pampered palace bird destined for the emperor's table. The history of the turkey's domestication is a fascinating story that science has only recently unraveled. For a long time, historians believed that the turkey was domesticated once, in a single event in Mexico. This Mexican turkey is the ancestor of virtually every single Thanksgiving and Christmas turkey eaten around the world today. However, genetic research has revealed a surprise. There was a second, completely independent domestication of the turkey that took place among the ancestral Pueblo and peoples in the American Southwest. But here is the twist. These southwestern turkeys were not primarily raised for their meat. Archaeological evidence shows that their bones were rarely butchered. Instead, they were kept almost exclusively for their feathers, which were essential for ceremonies and for making warm blankets. It is a powerful example of how two different cultures can look at the same animal and see to completely different resources. The academic world is still buzzing with this discovery, trying to understand the different cultural drivers that lead to these two very different relationships with the same bird. You watch as a platter of shredded turkey in a deep, dark mole sauce is placed in the center of the feasting table. The aroma is intoxicating, a complex cloud of chili, spice, and smoke. This is not everyday food. This is the taste of community, of celebration, of abundance. It is a dish that takes time, skill, and precious resources, a fitting tribute to the only bird you brought into your home and made your own. Leaving the familiar comforts of the China Empire gardens and the household hearth, you once again find yourself in a canoe, but this time you are gliding out onto the open waters of Lake Texcoco itself. The city of Tenochtitlan recedes behind you, its pyramids and temples becoming smaller against the backdrop of the great volcanoes. Here, the bounty is not cultivated in neat rows. It is harvested directly from the lake's vast, shimmering expanse. Your canoe approaches a patch of water that looks different. It is covered with a fine, blue-green scum, like a layer of algae blanketing the surface. To an outsider, it might look unpleasant, a sign of stagnant water. But to you, it is another source of food. A man in a nearby canoe is skillfully working a very fine meshed net, skimming this green layer from the water. He scoops it up and pours the dense, green liquid into a basket, allowing the excess water to drain away. What he is harvesting is something you call Tlatelolco, which translates to something like stone's excrement. It sounds unappetizing, but this is one of the most protein-packed foods available to you. Modern science knows it is spirulina, a type of blue-green algae. The harvested wet paste is taken back to shore, where it is spread out thinly on the ground to dry in the sun. It forms into brittle, dark, green cakes. These cakes have a strange flavor, a little bit like cheese, a little bit like the sea, and very, very savory. You can crumble a piece of this lake cheese and sprinkle it over a tortilla for a quick, nutritious snack, or it can be mixed with chiles and tomatoes to form a rich, umari-laden sauce. It is an incredibly efficient food source. The algae grows rapidly in the alkaline waters of Lake Texcoco, requiring no effort to cultivate. It just needs to be harvested. It is pure, concentrated protein, a gift from the lake itself. When the Spanish first saw the Aztecs eating these dried green cakes, they were repulsed, describing them with disgust. They had no idea they were looking at what modern health food stores would one day sell as a superfood for a small fortune. As you paddle further, you look down into the clear water of the canals near the shore. You might see something that looks like a lizard, but a lizard that never grew up. It has a long, slender body, feathery pink gills that fan out from its head like a bizarre mane, and a face that seems to be fixed in a permanent, faint smile. This is the xocolātl. To you, this creature is not just an animal, it is a mythical being. According to legend, when the gods needed to sacrifice themselves to create the fifth sun, the sun you live under, one god, xocolātl, refused to die. He transformed himself again and again to escape the sacrifice, first into a Maggie plant, then into a cornstalk, and finally, he dove into the water and became the xocolātl. He was caught and sacrificed anyway, but his final form remained in the lake as a reminder of his story. Because of this sacred origin, the xocolātl is treated with a mixture of reverence and culinary interest. They are a delicacy. Their meat is said to be tender and taste somewhat like eel. Catching them in the shallow, muddy parts of the lake is a skillful task. They are most often toasted, sometimes wrapped in a corn husk with herbs and steamed, similar to a tamale. Eating an xocolātl is to consume a piece of mythology. There is a bizarre biological fact about the xocolātl that makes it a subject of intense scientific fascination today. The creature exhibits a trait called miotny, which means it reaches sexual maturity without ever undergoing metamorphosis. It is essentially a salamander that never gets past its baby. Aquatic stage. It keeps its feathery gills and lives its whole life in the water. Furthermore, it has almost supernatural powers of regeneration. If an xocolātl loses a limb, or even part of its brain or heart, it can regrow it perfectly, without any scarring. This regenerative ability is the holy grail for modern medical researchers, who study the xocolātl genes hoping to unlock the secrets to repairing human tissue. The question of how much of the Aztec diet came from the lake is still a topic of scholarly discussion. Some early Spanish accounts paint a picture of a population constantly eating all the creepy crawlies that breed in the lake. But archaeological evidence, analyzing food residues and bone piles, suggests that while these lake resources like spirulina, axolotls, frogs, and aquatic insects were certainly part of the diet, they were likely supplemental. They added crucial protein and variety, but the bulk of the calories still came from the foundational three sisters. The lake was a vast, diverse pantry, but the China Empire was the true breadbasket. Your canoe turns back towards the city. You carry with you the strange harvest of the lake, the savory green cakes of Tlatelolco and perhaps a few of the mythical, smiling xocolātl. It is a reminder that in your world, food can be found in the most unexpected places, skimmed from the surface of the water or pulled from the muddy bottom, each with its own unique story and flavor. Your journey for provisions now takes you away from the water and into the bustling heart of the marketplace. The air is thick with earth and smells and the noise of 10,000 conversations. You pass stalls piled high with colorful giles, pyramids of vibrant green squashes, and baskets overflowing with beans of every color. But you are headed for a stall that emits a very particular sound, a faint, dry crackling, and a very particular smell, a savory, nutty aroma. In large, shallow clay dishes set over low embers, a woman is stirring a rustling, reddish-brown mountain of what, at first glance, might look like dried seeds or spices. But as you get closer, you see that they are insects. Specifically, grasshoppers. These are chapulines, and they are one of your favorite snacks. Harvesting them is a seasonal activity. In the late summer and early autumn, when the grasshopper populations boom in the maize and alfalfa fields, villagers go out with large, sweeping nets. They catch them by the thousands. The process of preparing them is meticulous. First, they are left to starve for a day or two, to purge their systems. Then, they are typically boiled or toasted. The most common way you see them here in the market is toasted on a comal with a little bit of garlic, lime juice, and, of course, ground chili. The vendor uses a small scoop to pour a pile of the crispy critters onto a piece of dried corn husk. You pay her with a few cacao beans, and she hands you your snack. You pop one into your mouth. The texture is the first thing you notice. A satisfying, airy crunch, not at all leggy or unpleasant. Then the flavor hits you. It is not buggy. It is savory. A little bit salty, a little bit tangy from the lime, with a nice kick from a chili. The grasshopper itself has a mild, nutty, almost shrimp-like flavor. It is a perfect snack food, as addictive as toasted pumpkin seeds. To you, eating chapulines is completely normal. Insects are just another food group, another gift from the land, and a very important one at that. They are an incredible source of protein, often containing a higher percentage of protein by weight than beef. Not that you have ever tasted beef. They are also rich in vitamins and minerals. In a world where large domesticated animals are scarce, insects are a crucial source of high-quality nutrition. And you do not just eat grasshoppers. The Aztec menu of insects is long and varied. There are the maggie worms, the plump, pale larvae that infest the agave plants, which are considered a delicacy when fried, with a rich flavor like a nutty pork scratching. There are Eskimos, the larvae of a particular species of ant that lives in the roots of the agave. These tiny, white eggs look a bit like cottage cheese or couscous and have a delicate, buttery, and slightly nutty taste. They are often called insect caviar and are one of the most prized and expensive foods you can eat, a true luxury reserved for the wealthy. You also eat waterflies and their eggs, which are harvested from the lake and made into savory cakes. There is a strange little folk belief associated with eating chapulines. A common saying goes that if you eat a chapulin from a particular region, you are destined to return there one day. It is a bit like the modern myth of throwing a coin in a fountain. It is a whimsical superstition, a way of tying a person to a place through the act of eating its local specialty. The consumption of insects, or entomophagy, is a practice that separates your culinary world from the European one more starkly than almost anything else. When the Spanish arrived, they were utterly horrified by this practice. They saw it as barbaric and primitive, a sign of savagery. This deep-seated European disgust for eating insects is a major reason why the practice was suppressed and became stigmatized in many parts of Mexico after the conquest. It is a cultural prejudice that modern environmentalists and nutritionists are now trying to reverse, promoting insects as a sustainable and incredibly efficient source of protein for a growing global population. The Aztecs were, in this respect, centuries ahead of their time. But was everyone eating insects all the time? This is where historians and archaeologists have some debate. The Spanish accounts, perhaps wanting to emphasize the otherness of the Aztecs, might have exaggerated the prevalence of insect consumption. Archaeological evidence can be tricky. Insect exoskeletons are fragile and do not preserve well over time, making it hard to find direct evidence in ancient garbage heaps or food residues. The consensus is that while a wide variety of insects were known and eaten, they were likely a supplemental and seasonal source of protein, rather than a daily staple for everyone. Luxury insects like Eskimos were certainly rare, while chapulines were a more common, seasonal treat enjoyed by many. You finish your cone of chapulines, licking the chili and lime dust from your fingers. It was a delicious, savory, and protein-rich snack that cost you very little. As you walk away from the stall, you hear the familiar crunch and smell the toasting garlic. It is a normal, comforting part of the market symphony. It is the taste of a resource that is abundant, sustainable, and completely misunderstood by outsiders. Now, with your savory craving satisfied, your mind might turn to something a little sweeter. After the savory crunch of the chapulines and the fiery kick of chili, your palate might crave a different kind of sensation, sweetness. In your world, there is no sugar cane. The vast, monoculture fields of sugar that will one day transform the landscape and the global economy do not exist yet. The intensely sweet, crystalline substance that we call sugar is entirely unknown to you. So how do you satisfy a sweet tooth? You turn to the natural gifts of the land, which are more subtle, more complex, and in many ways, more interesting. Your primary source of sweetness comes from the very same plant that gives you the sacred, intoxicating drink of pulque, the magi, or agave plant. This spiky, majestic succulent is a fountain of resources, and one of its greatest gifts is aguamiel, or honey water. To harvest it, a skilled specialist called a Tlatelolco finds a mature magi plant that is ready to flower. Just before it ends up its giant central stalk, he cuts out its heart, creating a small well in the center of the plant. The plant, thinking it is feeding its flower stalk, continuously weeps its sweet, watery sap into this well. The Tlatelolco uses a long, hollowed-out gourd called an xocolātl to siphon this aguamiel out of the plant. Twice a day. A single plant can produce this sweet sap for several months. Fresh aguamiel is a delicious, refreshing drink on its own, with a light, clean sweetness. But to create a more concentrated sweetener, this sap is gently heated in a clay pot for a very long time. As the water slowly evaporates, the liquid thickens and darkens, transforming into a thick, dark, and intensely sweet syrup. This is agave nectar. It has a rich, complex flavor, far more nuanced than simple sugar, with notes of caramel and vanilla. You use it to sweeten your atol, to drizzle over fruit, or to create sweet fillings for tamales. Your other main source of sweetness comes from the sky, or rather, from the creatures that fly through it. You have honey, but it is not from the large, aggressive European honeybees you might picture. Those bees will be brought over by the Spanish. Your honey comes from a variety of native stingles bees. These bees are smaller and gentler, and they are often kept right in the family home. Their nests are not large, hanging hives, but are often housed in hollow logs or clay pots, a practice called meliponiculture. The honey they produce is different, too. It is more liquid, less viscous than European honey, and it has a lighter, more floral, and slightly tangy flavor. The taste varies dramatically depending on what flowers the bees have been visiting. Because the hives are small and the bees produce less honey, it is a precious and highly valued commodity. It is used as a sweetener, but also as a medicine. You might use it to soothe a sore throat or to dress a wound, as your people have recognized its antibacterial properties. There is a curious, almost forgotten sweetener from the Aztec world, cornstalk syrup. Before the maize plant produces its cobs, its stalk is full of sweet juice. You can cut down these stalks, crush them, and press out the sweet liquid. This juice can then be boiled down into a syrup, much like maple syrup or agave nectar. This was likely one of the most ancient sweeteners in Mesoamerica, used long before the techniques for tapping the magi or keeping bees were perfected. However, it presents a difficult choice. Do you harvest the stalks early for their sweetness, or do you wait for the plant to produce the life-sustaining grain? Because of this, cornstalk syrup was likely a less common, more opportunistic sweetener. Did the Aztecs have a sweet tooth in the modern sense? This is a point of contention among food historians. The Spanish, accustomed to the sugar-rich desserts of Europe, often described the Aztec diet as overwhelmingly savory and spicy. They did not seem to have a dedicated dessert course at the end of their meals in the European style. Sweets were more integrated into the meal itself, a sweet tamale alongside a savory one, or a sweet atoll for breakfast. Some historians argue that the Aztec palate was simply not conditioned to crave intense sweetness. Others suggest that sweeteners like agave and honey were valuable commodities, used sparingly and with purpose, not for frivolous indulgence. The concept of dessert as a separate, sugar-laden category may be a cultural construct that simply did not apply to your world. You watch as a vendor in the market drizzle a thin stream of dark, lustrous gave nectar over a slice of fresh May fruit. The combination is heavenly. The creamy, sweet fruit enhanced by the complex, caramel notes of the syrup. It is a sweetness that tastes of the earth, of the sun, of a giant spiky plant that offers up its heart. It is not the sharp, one-dimensional hit of refined sugar. It is a gentler, more profound sweetness, a flavor that has to be patiently coaxed from the landscape. It is the perfect, subtle end to a culinary exploration. For now. But the magi plant has another, more potent secret to share. The sun is lower in the sky now, and the day's hard work is done. The market is winding down, and the air is filled with the scent of cooking fires preparing for the evening meal. In this transitional hour, you might seek out a different kind of drink, one that soothes the body and lightens the spirit. You find yourself at a Tlatelolco, a specific kind of establishment, perhaps just a designated corner of a courtyard, where a special beverage is served. The drink is xocolātl, though it is more commonly known by its later name, Tlatelolco. It is served in a simple clay cup, and it looks unlike anything else. It is a milky, white, and slightly viscous liquid, with a frothy head on top. You take a sip. The taste is complex and challenging to describe. It is slightly sour, a bit like yogurt or buttermilk, but also has an underlying sweetness. There is a distinctive, almost vegetal flavor that comes from its source. And, of course, there is the gentle, creeping warmth of alcohol. Tlatelolco is the fermented sap of the magi plant, the very same aguamiel or honey water that you saw being boiled down into agave nectar. But for Tlatelolco, the aguamiel is not heated. Instead, It is collected from the heart of the magi and poured into large clay pots or animal skin bags. A small out of mother, a starter from a previous batch of pulq, is added to the fresh sap. This inoculates the sweet liquid with the necessary bacteria and yeasts, kicking off the fermentation process. The fermentation is fast and wild. Within a day, or even just a few hours in the hot sun, the sweet agua meal is transformed into the alcoholic, frothy pulq. Because it ferments so quickly and continues to ferment even after it is made, it has an incredibly short shelf life. It has to be drunk fresh, usually on the same day it is made. It cannot be bottled or stored for long periods, which meant that its consumption was always a local affair, centered around the magi growing regions. This is why you could never be a pulq exporter. The drink simply would not survive the journey. This drink has a deep, sacred, and somewhat contradictory role in your society. On the one hand, it is a gift from the gods. There is a whole pantheon of deities associated with pulq, most famously the goddess Mahul, who is the personification of the magi plant itself, and the Sension to the Chden, the 400 rabbits, who are the gods of drunkenness. Each of the 400 rabbits represents a different level and character of intoxication, from silly and giggly to belligerent and sleepy. Because of this sacred status, its consumption is strictly controlled. Drunkenness, especially in public, is a serious social taboo and a crime. A young person or a common worker caught drunk could be severely punished, even having their head shaved as a mark of public shame. For a noble or a priest, the punishment could be as severe as death. But, and this is the contradiction, there are specific times when getting drunk is perfectly acceptable, even encouraged. During certain religious festivals, the entire populace might be allowed to drink pulq freely. And most interestingly, once you reach the age of 70, all restrictions are lifted. The elderly are not only allowed, but are expected to drink as much pulq as they want. It is seen as a right earned after a lifetime of hard work and contribution to society. You can almost imagine it as the Aztec version of a state-sponsored retirement plan. There is a strange detail about pulq that modern science has helped to explain. The Spanish were often puzzled by how the Aztecs, with their relatively low meat diet, seemed so healthy. Part of the answer, it turns out, was the pulq. For a long time, it was just seen as an intoxicant. But recent analysis has shown that pulq is a nutritional powerhouse. It is rich in probiotics, from the fermentation, vitamins like C and B complex, and minerals. It is essentially an alcoholic, probiotic vitamin supplement. For the common person, a regular cup of pulq was a significant nutritional boost. The exact nature of pulq's role in Aztec society is still a matter of some academic debate. Was it primarily a ritual beverage, its consumption tightly controlled by the priestly class? Or was it more of a common person's daily drink? A liquid tortilla that provided both calories and a mild buzz after a long day's work. The official laws recorded by the Spanish suggest strict control, but folk traditions and the sheer prevalence of magi cultivation suggest it might have been more widely consumed than the official record states. It was likely both. A sacred drink for rituals and a nutritional, lightly alcoholic beverage for the masses, with the social rules mainly designed to curb excessive public drunkenness rather than consumption itself. You finish your cup of pulq. The milky liquid leaves a coating in your mouth, and you feel a pleasant sense of relaxation spreading through your limbs. It is the drink of the earth, a direct transformation of the sweet blood of the magi into something that nourishes, intoxicates, and connects you to the gods. But as potent as this sacred drink is, there is another, even more exclusive, even more powerful substance growing in the lands of the empire. A substance that is not drunk from a simple clay cup, but from an ornate, ceremonial vessel. A substance that is so valuable, it is used as money. You are now entering the world of the truly elite. a realm of flavor and status far removed from the daily sustenance of the three sisters. The object of this reverence does not grow in the high, arid plains around Tenochtitlan. It comes from the hot, humid lowlands of the empire, a region you might have to travel days to reach. It is carried back to the capital city as a form of tribute, a tax paid by a conquered people. It is the cacao bean. You see them in the Tlatelolco market, not piled high in huge baskets like corn or beans, but carefully counted out by merchants in a designated, high-status section. They are small, brown, and almond-shaped. To you, these are not just the seeds of a fruit. They are currency. This is the money that grows on trees. Your entire economic system, at a certain level, is based on these beans. While much of the economy operates on a system of barter and tribute, a farmer trading beans for pottery, a craftsman trading his wares for a turkey, cacao beans provide a standardized, portable, and universally accepted form of value. They are the Aztec dollar. The exchange rates are complex and well understood. A small rabbit, for instance, might cost you 30 cacao beans. A single, large tomato could be worth 1 bean. A turkey egg might set you back 3 beans, while the whole bird could be 100 or more. For a larger purchase, like a canoe, you would need several thousand beans, which would be carried in a sack. This system was so sophisticated that it even had a problem that modern economies face: counterfeiting. Some unscrupulous merchants were known to take the empty shells of cacao beans and carefully fill them with mud or sand, passing them off as genuine. Being caught doing this would result in severe punishment. Why were these beans so valuable? Part of it is simple supply and demand. The cacao tree, the Obama cacao, is notoriously picky about where it grows. It needs a very specific hot and humid climate, with plenty of shade. It could not be cultivated in the high-altitude valley of Mexico where Tenochtitlan is located. All cacao had to be imported, making it an exotic and scarce luxury good. Control over the cacao-growing regions was a major driver of Aztec military expansion. But the value was more than just rarity. Like maize, cacao was believed to have a divine origin. The god Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, was said to have stolen the cacao tree from the other gods in paradise and brought it to humanity as a gift. He taught people how to cultivate it and prepare the sacred drink from its beans. When he was later cast out of his kingdom, he promised to return. This legend would have profound and unforeseen consequences when the Spanish arrived. The process of turning the raw fruit into the valuable bean is a long one. The cacao pods, which grow directly from the trunk of the tree, are harvested and split open. Inside is a white, sweet, and tangy pulp surrounding the beans. This pulp-covered mass is scooped out and left to ferment for several days. This fermentation process is crucial. It kills the germ of the seed, preventing it from sprouting, and, more importantly, it develops the complex flavor precursors that we associate with chocolate. An unfermented cacao bean tastes bitter and astringent. After fermentation, the beans are spread out to dry in the sun, which darkens them to their familiar brown color and makes them stable for transport and storage. Finally, they are lightly toasted, which fully awakens their rich, aromatic flavors. There's a curious little detail in how the beans were counted. You did not just count them one by one for large transactions. You used a base 20 system. A count was 20 beans. A shikipilai was 8. Zaro beans, which is 20x 20x20. The corda, or load, was 3 shikipiles, or 24 zaro beans, roughly what a single porter could carry on his back. This mathematical system allowed merchants to quickly calculate the value of large quantities of goods. The question of whether cacao was money in the modern sense is a favorite topic of debate among economic historians. Some argue that because it had an intrinsic value, you could consume it. It was technically a commodity currency, more like gold than a modern fiat currency. Others argue that its use was so standardized and widespread for transactions of all kinds that it functioned exactly like money. It was a unit of account, a medium of exchange, and a store of value. The Spanish themselves were so impressed by the system that they continued to use cacao beans as a form of currency for small transactions for decades after the conquest. You watch as a nobleman, distinguished by his fine cotton cloak and feathered adornments, completes a transaction. He does not pull out a leather purse of clinking metal. He hands over a small cloth bag, from which the merchant carefully counts out the precious brown beans. These beans are far too valuable to be eaten by just anyone. They are destined to be transformed, through a complex and ceremonial process, into a drink reserved for the most powerful people in the empire. A drink that is not sweet and comforting, but bitter, potent, and divine. Forget everything you think you know about hot chocolate. Forget the sweet, milky, comforting drink served with marshmallows. The beverage you are about to witness being prepared is a different beast entirely. It is intense, powerful, and profoundly adult. It is xocolātl, which translates roughly to bitter water, and it is the entire reason that cacao beans are worth more than their weight in, well, almost anything. The preparation is a ritual, a performance of status. It begins with the highest quality cacao beans, those that have been perfectly fermented, dried, and toasted to release their deepest aromas. These toasted beans are shelled, and the nibs inside are placed on a cream meat. But this is not the same meat used for grinding corn. This one might be more finely carved, perhaps even heated from below by placing a small pan of embers beneath it. This gentle heat helps to melt the natural fat in the cacao, the cocoa butter, as it is being ground. A woman, likely a specialized servant in a noble house, begins to grind. The process is slow and laborious. She grinds the nibs into a coarse powder, then grinds them again and again. As she works, the friction and the gentle heat transform the gritty nibs into a thick, oily, and intensely aromatic paste. This is pure, unadulterated chocolate liquor. This chocolate paste is the foundation, but it is rarely consumed on its own. Now comes the art of flavoring. The paste is placed in a special vessel, and water is added. Then, the signature ingredients are stirred in. First and foremost, joyos. Finely ground red chili peppers are a near constant addition, giving the drink a surprising and invigorating heat. This is not a mild species. It can be quite potent. Then, other flavorings are added, depending on the occasion and the host's preference. The common one is cuacatli, the dried flower of a specific type of tree, which has a complex, spicy flavor reminiscent of black pepper and cinnamon. Sometimes, a precious vanilla bean is scraped into the mixture, adding its fragrant, floral notes. Another occasional addition is accio, or annatto seeds, which do not add much flavor but give the drink a dramatic, reddish brown color, perhaps to simulate the color of blood in a ceremonial context. What is almost never added is a sweetener. This is a savory, spicy, and bitter drink. Once the ingredients are mixed, the final and most dramatic step begins, the frothing. The frothy head is the most prized part of the drink. To create it, the liquid is poured from a great height, from one vessel to another, over and over again. This takes incredible skill. The preparer holds one jug high above her head and pours a thin, steady stream into another jug sitting on the floor. This aerates the liquid, creating a thick, stable, and persistent foam. Alternatively, a special wooden frother, a molinillo, might be spun rapidly between the palms to whip air into the drink. There is a subtle but important detail about the temperature of this drink. It was almost always served cool or lukewarm, not piping hot. The Spanish chroniclers are very clear on this. Serving it hot would destroy the delicate foam and alter the flavors of the spices. This was a cool, refreshing, and stimulating elixir, not a warming winter beverage. The chemistry behind that perfect foam is something that food scientists have studied extensively. The frothy head on xocolātl is a complex matrix. It is made up of proteins and particles from the cacao, but it is stabilized by the fats, the cocoa butter, and certain starches that might be added, such as a small amount of fine corn flour, which was a common thickener. The debate among historians is whether this foam was purely for texture and aesthetics, or if it had a deeper, symbolic meaning. Some argue the foam represented life for sore breath, making the drink even more spiritually potent. The importance of the foam cannot be overstated. A poorly made, flat xocolātl would be a social embarrassment for the host. Is it possible that some versions were sweetened, while the vast majority of accounts describe a bitter, spicy drink? There are a few more ambiguous references that mention the addition of honey. This leads to a debate. Were these sweetened versions a rare exception, perhaps made for women or children of the nobility? Or were they a different category of cacao beverage altogether, less common than the classic spicy xocolātl? The overwhelming evidence points to bitterness and spice as the standard, but it is a small crack in our understanding that keeps food historians searching for more definitive recipes. The final drink is served in a highly decorated, beautiful cup, often made from a painted gourd, called a xocolātl. You are presented with one. The cup is cool to the touch. The liquid inside is dark opaque, crowned with a thick, reddish-brown foam. You lift it and take a sip. The first sensation is the foam, light and airy. Then the liquid itself hits your tongue. It is shockingly bitter, like the strongest black coffee you can imagine. This is immediately followed by a wave of chilly heat that warms your throat, and then the complex symphony of the other spices emerges. It is not an easy drink to love. It is challenging, intense, and deeply complex. And you feel its effects almost immediately. A surge of energy, a sharpening of your focus. This is not a drink for relaxation. This is a drink for power. You are holding this potent, bitter elixir in your hands, the foam still tickling your nose. The question arises, who gets to drink this? You look around the room. You are not in a commoner's home. You are in the courtyard of a noble's palace, or perhaps in the barracks of a high-ranking warrior. The people drinking xocolātl alongside you are not farmers or fishermen. They are lords, priests, and elite soldiers. In the stratified society of the Aztec Empire, the consumption of xocolātl was a privilege, a bright line that separated the powerful from the common. For the average person toiling in the china pans or carrying goods to the market, cacao beans were money to be spent, not a food to be eaten. To drink xocolātl without permission was an act of profound social transgression, a form of theft from the state, and it could be punished severely. It was an exclusive right of the ruling class. Why was it so restricted? The first reason is simple economics. As you saw, the beans were currency. To drink xocolātl was, quite literally, to drink money. It was an act of conspicuous consumption, a way for the elite to display their immense wealth and status. Hosting a feast where large quantities of the precious beverage were served was a statement of power, showing that the host was so wealthy they could afford to consume what others used to buy their daily bread. The second reason was physiological and spiritual. Your people believed that xocolātl had powerful effects on the body and mind. It was seen as a stimulant, an energizer, and an aphrodisiac. It was considered a sacred substance that could alter one's state of being, bringing them closer to the divine. Such a powerful substance could not be entrusted to the common masses. It was reserved for those who had the spiritual authority and discipline to handle it, the priests who needed to stay awake for long nighttime vigils, and the rulers who needed to project an aura of vitality and power. Its use among warriors was particularly important. The Aztec army was the foundation of the empire's power, and xocolātl was their high-performance energy drink. Soldiers, especially those in the elite jaguar and eagle warrior societies, were given xocolātl before battle. The theobromine and caffeine in the cacao would give them a surge of energy and stamina, dulling fatigue and sharpening their senses. It was military-grade fuel, a controlled substance used to enhance the effectiveness of the empire's most important assets. The emperor, Moctezuma II, was said to drink dozens of goblets of it a day, not just for pleasure, but to maintain his legendary stamina and vigor. There is a curious gendered aspect to its consumption. The vast majority of accounts from the Spanish chroniclers describe xocolātl as a drink for men. It was associated with masculine power, virility, and warfare. However, some sources, including illustrations in the ancient codices, occasionally depict women, likely noble women, drinking it. This has led to a debate among historians. Was it strictly a man's drink, with these depictions being rare exceptions for high-ranking women at court? Or did women of the elite class have more access to it than the male Spanish observers noted or cared to record? The prevailing theory is that while it was overwhelmingly associated with men, elite women were not entirely excluded from its consumption, particularly in ceremonial or courtly settings. The one group almost universally excluded from drinking xocolātl was children. Its powerful stimulating effects were considered completely inappropriate for them. This stands in stark contrast to the modern world, where chocolate has become almost synonymous with childhood treats. It is one of the most profound inversions in the history of food. But was the prohibition really absolute? Could a commoner truly never taste it? This is where the historical picture gets a little fuzzy. While the formula for xocolātl was strictly for the elite, there might have been ways for others to get a hint of its flavor. As you saw, a less prestigious version of the drink could be made by mixing ground cacao into the common corn gruel, perul. This champorado-like beverage would have been a more diluted, less potent, and more accessible way to consume cacao. Furthermore, some historians speculate that merchants who dealt in cacao beans, the palate, might have been permitted to drink it as a privilege of their trade, or perhaps they skimmed a little off the top for personal use. It is likely the rules were more complex than a simple yes for the rich and no for the poor, with various exceptions and gray areas. You look down at the intricate patterns on your xocolātl cup. This is not just a beverage, it is a symbol. It is a physical manifestation of the social pyramid, with the emperor at the top and the farmers at the bottom. The rich, bitter liquid inside is a taste of power, a flavor reserved for those who command armies, interpret the will of the gods, and rule the empire. It is a drink that fuels ambition and separates the rulers from the ruled. And as you will see, it is not the only rare and precious flavor reserved for the top of the social ladder. As you savor the lingering, complex bitterness of the xocolātl, your host decides to introduce another, even more precious flavor to the mix. A servant brings a small, beautifully carved wooden box. He opens it, and a wave of intoxicating light sweet, floral, and creamy aroma fills the air. Inside, nestled on a piece of fine cotton cloth, are a few long, thin, dark brown pods. They are wrinkled and oily to the touch. This is Tlatelolco, the black flower. To you, it is one of the most exquisite fragrances on earth. We know it today as vanilla. The vanilla bean is the cured, dried fruit of a specific, very fussy species of orchid. Unlike the cacao tree, which grows in the hot lowlands, this orchid thrives in a very particular band of the coastal rainforest. Its cultivation is a marvel of patience and observation. The flower of the vanilla orchid is beautiful, but it blooms for only a single day, sometimes for just a few hours. In its native habitat, it is pollinated by a specific species of bee. If it is not pollinated during that short window, the flower withers and dies without producing a fruit. Your people, through incredible botanical insight, learned how to hand-pollinate these flowers. Using a small, pointed sliver of wood, A skilled cultivator would carefully lift the small flap inside the flower and press the pollen-containing parts together, doing the bees' work by hand. This was a delicate, time-consuming process that allowed for the cultivation of vanilla outside of its natural pollinators' range. After pollination, the green bean-like pods grow for several months, but a fresh vanilla bean has almost no flavor or aroma. The magic happens during the curing process, another long and complex procedure. The harvested green pods are subjected to a months-long process of sweating and drying. They are laid out in the sun during the day to heat up, then wrapped in cloth and packed in boxes at night to sweat. This process is repeated day after day. It is during this slow enzymatic fermentation that a compound called glucovanillin is broken down, releasing the intensely aromatic molecule we know as vanillin, along with hundreds of other complex aromatic compounds. The bean shrivels, darkens to its characteristic black-brown color, and develops its iconic, powerful fragrance. In your world, vanilla is almost inseparable from xocolātl. It was its most famous and luxurious dance partner. As you saw, a small piece of a vanilla bean was often scraped into the chocolate mixture before frothing, adding a layer of sweet, creamy fragrance that softened the harsh bitterness of the cacao and the sharp heat of the chili. A cup of xocolātl flavored with vanilla was the height of luxury, a drink served only by the wealthiest nobles and the emperor himself. It was a flavor combination reserved for the pinnacle of the social pyramid, but its use was not limited to flavoring the sacred drink. Vanilla, as powerful and pleasant aroma, made it a key ingredient in other applications for the elite. It was used as a perfume. The beans might be mixed with other aromatic herbs and flowers and carried in small pouches by nobles to scent their bodies and clothes. It was also used as a form of air freshener in the palaces of the rich, with the beans being burned as a kind of incense to create a pleasant and welcoming atmosphere. Its scent was synonymous with wealth, refinement, and pleasure. There is a small, curious detail about the vanilla trade. Because it was so valuable and came from specific tribute-paying regions, it was often bundled together with other luxury goods. The Tlatelolco people, who lived on the Gulf Coast and were masters of vanilla cultivation, would pay their tribute to Tenochtitlan not just in vanilla beans, but also in fine cotton textiles and exotic bird feathers. These goods would travel together, a package of pure luxury, carried on the backs of porters all the way to the capital. The question of whether vanilla was ever used by common people is a subject of historical debate. Given its rarity, the complexity of its cultivation and curing, and its status as a tribute item, the consensus is a firm no. Unlike cacao, which at least had a more accessible form in it all, there seems to be no evidence that vanilla was ever consumed or used by anyone outside the highest echelons of society. It was even more exclusive than cacao. The average Aztec citizen would likely have gone their entire life without ever tasting or even smelling it. Its flavor was purely aspirational, a scent from the world of the gods and their earthly representatives. The Spanish, upon encountering vanilla in Moctezuma's court, were immediately captivated. They had never experienced anything like its flavor and aroma. They quickly recognized its value. After the conquest, sought to control its production. For over 300 years, Mexico held a global monopoly on vanilla production, precisely because no one else knew the secret of hand pollination. The orchids would grow elsewhere, but without the native bee or the knowledge of how to bypass it, they would never produce fruit. It was a botanical secret that kept the treasure of vanilla locked in its homeland for centuries. A servant takes one of the precious beans and, using a sharp obsidian blade, splits it lengthwise, scraping the tiny, fragrant black seeds into a fresh batch of xocolātl. The room fills with that heavenly scent, a sweet counterpoint to the bitter chocolate and spicy chili. To drink this is to taste a flavor that is the result of a fussy flower, a patient farmer, a long journey, and a mountain of wealth. It is the perfume of power, the food you eat every day, the tortillas, the beans, the idol, is what sustains your body. The feasts of turkey mole and the luxurious sips of vanilla-laced xocolātl are what define your social standing. But there is another category of food entirely, one that is not prepared for you, or for the emperor, but for the gods themselves. This is the food of ritual, and its preparation is one of the most solemn and important duties of your society. Throughout the year, your calendar is marked by a cycle of 18 major festivals, each dedicated to a different god or group of gods. And at the heart of each festival is a special food offering. These are not just leftovers from the human feast. They are specific dishes, prepared with immense care, following strict, ancient recipes, designed to please and nourish the divine beings who control your world. One of the most striking examples of this is the festival of Tlatelolco, our Lord the Flayed One, a powerful and fearsome god of agriculture, disease, and renewal. To honor him, the priests and the populace prepare large quantities of tamales, but with a specific, symbolic filling, a mixture of corn and beans. This simple combination is meant to represent the bounty of the earth that Tlatelolco provides. These tamales are offered at his temple, a way of giving back a piece of the harvest he made possible. A more elaborate and visually stunning food offering occurs during the festival for Tlatelolco, the hummingbird god of the sun and war, the patron deity of your Mexica people. For this festival, a massive idol of the god is constructed. But it is not carved from stone or wood. It is made from a dough called xocolātl. This dough is a mixture of ground amaranth seeds and toasted maize, bound together with honey or agave nectar. Amaranth, a tiny, protein-rich grain, was almost as important as maize in your diet and had a deep ritual significance. The priests, chanting and performing rituals, would sculpt this sacred, edible dough into a life-sized statue of the god, complete with intricate details and adornments. The eyes, teeth, and nails of the statue would be made from colored beans or other seeds. This massive amaranth idol would be the centerpiece of the festival, placed on an altar in the temple. At the culmination of the ceremony, the dough statue would be symbolically sacrificed, broken into pieces by the high priest. These pieces would then be distributed among the people, from the highest noble to the lowest commoner. By eating a piece of the idol, you are quite literally consuming your god, internalizing his divine power and creating a direct, physical communion with it. It is a ritual that deeply shocked the Catholic friars who witnessed it, as it seemed to be a pagan parody of their own Eucharist. There is a curious detail about the liquid offerings made to the gods. While pulque was a common offering, especially to the gods of the earth and fertility, another liquid was even more precious: blood. In many ceremonies, priests and even common people would engage in ritual bloodletting, piercing their earlobes, tongues, or other body parts with sharp obsidian blades or magi thorns. The blood would be collected on paper or dripped directly onto the idols of the gods. To you, blood is xocolātl, precious water, the very essence of life. Offering your own blood was the most personal and potent sacrifice you could make, a way of feeding the gods the life force they needed to keep the cosmos in balance. The question of human sacrifice is an unavoidable and somber part of this story. In certain major festivals, captured enemy warriors or other designated individuals were sacrificed to the gods. While the act itself is grim, the culinary aspect that sometimes followed is even more so. In some highly specific ritual contexts, a small portion of the victim's flesh was prepared and consumed by the captor and his family. This was not an act of hunger or cannibalism in the nutritional sense. It was a deeply complex and sacred ritual. By consuming a piece of the valiant enemy warrior, the captor was believed to absorb his strength and courage. It is a practice that is, understandably, very difficult for modern minds to comprehend and is still debated by historians. Was it widespread? Was it limited to a very small, elite group of warriors? The Spanish accounts, eager to paint the Aztecs as savage, may have exaggerated its frequency. But the archaeological and iconographic evidence confirms that this ritual, however limited, did exist. As you stand in the great plaza before the Temple Omeir, you are surrounded by the sights and smells of a festival. The air is thick with the smoke of copal incense and the aroma of thousands of special tamales being steamed. You see the vibrant colors of the amaranth dough being shaped into a god. This food is not about nutrition or status. It is about cosmology. It is about maintaining the fragile balance of the universe. It is about the sacred duty to feed the powerful, and often terrifying, gods who gave you life and could just as easily take it away. Every dish is a prayer, every meal a transaction with the divine. And in this grand theater of gods and food, there is one place where every single ingredient of your world comes together: the great market. You push your way through the throng of people, your senses completely overwhelmed. This is the great market at Tlatelolco, the sister city to Tenochtitlan, connected by a short causeway. It is not just a place to buy food. It is the economic, social, and cultural epicenter of the entire empire. The Spanish conquistador Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a battle-hardened soldier who had seen the great markets of Rome and Constantinople, was left speechless by its scale and order. He said he had never seen a market so large, so well managed, and so full of people. The noise is a constant, humming roar, a blend of tens of thousands of voices haggling, greeting, and gossiping. The air is a thick soup of smells. In one aisle, you are hit with the sharp, fresh scent of chiles and tomatillo. A few steps later, it is the earthy smell of clay pottery and wet stone from the meat grinders. Turn a corner, and you are enveloped in the sweet, floral perfume of a flower vendor's stall, followed by the savory aroma of freshly toasted chapulines. The market is not a chaotic jumble. It is meticulously organized, a testament to Aztec civic planning. There are specific streets and sections for each type of good. In one long row, you see nothing but pottery, huge clay pots for storing water, flat comals for cooking tortillas, and delicate, painted bowls for serving it all. Another section is dedicated entirely to textiles. Here you can see rough Maggie fiber cloaks for the common person, piled next to bolts of brilliantly dyed cotton cloth reserved for the nobility. But your focus is the food section, which is the largest and most vibrant part of the market. It is a living library of everything the empire produces. You see the staples, mountains of maize in every color, from deep purple to sunny yellow, baskets overflowing with dozens of varieties of beans and squash. Then there are the specialists. There's the turkey seller, with his gobbling wares in wooden cages. There is the lake harvester, selling the green cakes of spirulina and perhaps a few prized axolotls swimming in a shallow tub. You see the insect vendor with his piles of crunchy grasshoppers on the sought-after insect caviar. Eskimos. You wander into the produce section, and the variety is stunning. There are heaps of red tomatoes and green tomatillo. You see avocados, prickly pear cactus petals, no palatoes, and exotic fruits you have never seen before, brought from the tropical lowlands, creamy yellow ziipotes, sweet memoirs, and the strange, white fish soursock. A man sells corn on the cob, roasted over embers and slathered with a paste of ground chili and salt. It is the Aztec equivalent of street food, hot, savory, and delicious. In a quieter, more high-status corner, you find the dealers of precious goods. Here, a merchant carefully weighs out vanilla beans, their fragrance perfuming the air around his stall. Next to him, a cacao merchant sits behind his neat piles of beans, the currency of the realm, conducting transactions with a serious, focused air. There's a fascinating detail about the market that speaks to its level of sophistication. A court of justice. At one end of the main plaza, a group of judges sits on a raised platform. Their job is to oversee the market, ensure fair trade, and settle disputes on the spot. If a customer feels they have been cheated on the quality of their beans, or if a merchant catches a thief, they are brought before this court. Justice is swift and public. It is a system that maintains order and trust in this vast, complex economic machine. Historians and archaeologists are still trying to fully grasp the logistics of this incredible place. How did all these goods get here? The Aztec Empire had no wheels for transport and no beasts of burden like horses or oxen. Everything, every single pot, every bag of corn, every feather, arrived on one of two modes of transport, in a canoe through the vast network of canals and lakes, or on the back of a human porter, a chinampas. These professional porters would carry astonishingly heavy loads, sometimes up to 50 pounds, 4 days on end, trekking from the furthest corners of the empire to bring their goods to this central hub. The entire magnificent market rests, quite literally, on the backs of these men. The debate over the number of people who visited this market daily is a classic historical argument. The Spanish, prone to hyperbole, claimed up to 60,000 people. Modern historians and archaeologists, using more conservative models based on the city's population, suggest a number closer to 20,000 on a normal day and perhaps 40,000 to 50,000 on a special market day. Even the lower estimates describe a commercial gathering of a scale that was almost unimaginable in contemporary Europe. You buy a warm tortilla and a piece of roasted squash, a simple lunch in the midst of this overwhelming abundance. You are sitting at the heart of a powerful and sophisticated world. Every ingredient you have encountered on your journey is here, laid out in a glorious, chaotic, yet perfectly ordered display. It feels like this city, this market, this way of life, is the center of the universe. It feels permanent, unshakable. But you notice something strange. There are whispers, rumors carried by messengers and merchants from the coast. Tales of floating mountains sighted on the eastern sea. Tales of men with skin as pale as the moon, with hair on their faces and sticks that spit fire. The world, and your food, is about to change forever. The rumors from the coast that you heard whispered in the market are no longer just whispers. They have become a terrifying reality. The floating mountains were ships, larger than any canoe you could have ever imagined. The men with pale skin have marched inland, their metal armor glinting in the sun, their giant deer, horses, striking fear into the hearts of everyone who sees them. They have come to Tenochtitlan. But the atmosphere in the city is thick with tension and fear. You watch these strange men walk through your streets, their heavy leather boots a stark contrast to the silent, sandaled feet of your people. You see their fascination and their disgust. They marvel at the size of your pyramids and the cleanliness of your city, but they recoil in horror from the images of your gods and the sight of blood-stained sacrificial stones. And they look at your food with the same mixture of curiosity and contempt. They are soldiers from a land of wheat, wine, and olive oil, a land of beef, pork, and cheese. Your world of maize, beans, and chiles is utterly alien to them. They try a tortilla and find it bland, a poor substitute for their crusty bread. They taste your savory, spicy xocolātl and spit it out, finding it a pig's drink, bitter and disgusting. They are polite about the turkey, as it is the closest thing to the chicken they know back home. But they are repulsed by the green spirulina cakes and the crunchy chapulines, seeing them as proof of your savagery. The aha moment for them, the one thing they truly value from your pantry, is not something you eat every day. It is the cacao beans, but not for the bitter drink you make. They quickly grasp their value as currency, as a portable form of wealth. They see the vast tributes of cacao flowing into the city and understand that controlling the beans means controlling the economy. The period that follows is a confusing and violent blur. The Spanish, initially guests, become occupiers. Moctezuma becomes their prisoner in his own palace. There are skirmishes, massacres, and eventually, and all-out war. Tenochtitlan, the magnificent city on the lake, becomes a battleground. The causeways that were once the arteries of commerce are now choked with warriors. The canals run reed. During the siege of the city, your entire food system, once a model of sustainability and abundance, collapses. The Spanish cut off the causeways, preventing any food from the mainland from reaching you. The canoes that once brought fresh produce from the chinampas are now war vessels. The chinampas themselves, the floating gardens that fed your empire, become battlefields. Your diet is reduced to whatever you can find. You hunt for rats and lizards. You strip the bark from trees and boil it. You skim the surface of the lake, not for the prized spirulina, but for any scum you can find. The three sisters, the foundation of your life, have failed you, not because they would not grow, but because you can no longer reach them. Starvation becomes as deadly an enemy as the Spanish sword. There is a sad, ironic detail from this dark time. The Spanish, too, were starving during the long siege. In their desperation, they began to eat the tortillas of their native allies, a food they had previously scorned. It is a moment that shows how hunger can erase culinary prejudice. The fall of the city is devastating. When the fighting finally stops, Tenochtitlan is a smoldering ruin. The temples are torn down, the canals are filled with rubble, and a new city begins to rise from the ashes, a city that will be called Mexico City. But the conquest is not just military and political, it is culinary. The Spanish bring their own food with them, planting the seeds of a completely new world in the soil of the old one. Why did the Aztec Empire, with its hundreds of thousands of warriors, fall to a few hundred Spaniards? It is the great, tragic question of your history, and historians have been arguing about it for 500 years. The Spanish had superior military technology, of course, steel swords, crossbows, cannons, and horses. But that was not the whole story. Cortés was a brilliant and ruthless political strategist, expertly exploiting the deep resentments that many conquered peoples felt towards their Aztec overlords, turning them into his allies. And then there was the invisible enemy, disease. Smallpox, brought unknowingly by one of the Spanish soldiers, swept through your population, which had no natural immunity. It killed millions, far more than any battle, wiping out warriors, priests, and farmers alike, shattering the social fabric of your civilization. The debate continues today over which factor, technology, alliances, or disease, was the most decisive. You stand in the ruins of your world. The familiar sounds of the meat eaten, the smell of the comal are gone. Replaced by the clang of hammers on stone as a new world is built on top of yours. The gods seem to have abandoned you. But even in this devastation, the seeds of your culinary heritage are not entirely destroyed. They are just buried, waiting for the moment they will be forced to mix with new, strange ingredients, creating something that is neither fully Aztec nor fully Spanish, but entirely new. The dust of conquest begins to settle, but the world you knew is gone. A new society, New Spain, is being built on the rubble of your empire. And in the kitchens and hearths of this new world, a quiet but profound collision is taking place. It is a culinary revolution, less violent than the military one, but just as transformative. European ingredients, brought over on the Spanish galleons, are meeting the ancient staples of your Aztec pantry. The first and most significant introduction is wheat. The Spanish friars, kneading bread for the sacrament of communion, insist on planting it. At first, it struggles to grow in the Mexican climate, but eventually, it takes hold. You see the first bakeries, producing crusty, yeasted loaves, a food utterly foreign to you. For a time, wheat bread is a high-status food for the Spanish, while you continue to eat your corn tortillas. But slowly, a fusion begins. Tortillas do not disappear, far from it, but a new option becomes available. The idea of a sandwich, using bread to enclose a filling, starts to take root. Then come the animals. The Spanish bring with them pigs, cows, chickens, goats, and sheep. These animals, which can be raised in large numbers, fundamentally change the landscape and the diet. The pig, in particular, is a culinary game changer. It thrives in the new environment. Its meat is flavorful and versatile. But more importantly, it provides a crucial ingredient, lard. You watch as a cook prepares masa for tamales. But instead of just corn and water, she now whips in a generous amount of pure white lard. The resulting tamale is richer, fluffier, and more decadent than any you have ever tasted. You see someone making beans. After they are boiled, they are mashed and fried in hot lard, creating a deeply savory, creamy paste, the true birth of refried beans. Lard transforms your cuisine, adding a new dimension of richness and flavor that was previously impossible. Cows bring not just beef, but also dairy. The concept of milk, cheese, and cream is entirely new to you. You watch as a cook takes one of your tortillas, sprinkles it with shredded turkey and chiles, and then adds a strange, salty, white substance that melts into a stringy, gooey delight when heated. This is the birth of the xocolātl as we know it today, a perfect fusion of the old world and the new. The corn tortilla provides the base, the native chiles provide the flavor, and the Spanish cheese provides the rich, melty texture. The Spanish also bring onions and garlic. These aromatic vegetables from the allium family find a happy home in your cuisine. They are quickly adopted, sautéed as a flavor base for sauces, stirred into beans, and sprinkled over roasted meats. It is hard to imagine your food without them. Yet just a generation ago, you had never tasted one. They complement the flavors of chiles and tomatoes so perfectly that it feels like they were always meant to be here. There is a strange culinary myth that emerged during this period. For a long time, it was believed that the famous mole poblano, the iconic, complex sauce of chiles and chocolate, was invented in a convent in the city of Puebla by nuns trying to impress a visiting archbishop. The story goes that they threw everything they had into a pot. Old world spices like cinnamon and cloves, New World chiles and chocolate, and magically created the legendary dish. It is a great story, but food historians now largely agree it is a romanticized fiction. The reality is that mole was a direct descendant of your pre-Hispanic mole. The basic technique of grinding chiles, seeds, and other ingredients into a complex sauce was purely Aztec. What the nuns and other cooks did was adapt the ancient recipe, incorporating new European ingredients like onions, garlic, and chicken or pork instead of turkey, and perhaps using European spices to supplement the native ones. Mole was not invented in a convent, it evolved there. The debate over the purity of Mexican cuisine is one that rages among chefs and historians. Is authentic Mexican food the pre-Hispanic diet of maize, beans, and chiles, or is the true soul of the cuisine found in this very fusion, the mestizaje, or mixing, of Spanish and indigenous ingredients? Most now argue for the latter. They contend that the genius of Mexican food lies precisely in its ability to adopt and integrate new elements without losing its ancient soul. The pork, the cheese, the onions, they did not erase the Aztec foundation. They built upon it, creating something new and arguably even more complex and delicious. You take a bite of a taco, but it is not just a tortilla with beans. This one is filled with slow-cooked, lard-infused pork, carnitas, topped with freshly chopped onion and a sprinkle of cilantro, another Spanish import. It is a perfect microcosm of your new reality. The ancient corn tortilla, a gift from your gods, is holding a world of new flavors brought from across the ocean. It is a collision of continents, a fusion of histories, all folded into a single, delicious bite. And the most famous Aztec ingredient of all is about to undergo its own radical transformation. The Spanish had conquered your land, and in the process, they had been conquered by some of your flavors. But the bitter, spicy xocolātl of your nobles remained a puzzle to them. They recognized its stimulating properties and its value, but the flavor was just too challenging for the European palate. For chocolate to begin its journey towards global domination, it needed one crucial ingredient, an ingredient the Spanish had in abundance: sugar. The first step in this transformation happened right here, in New Spain. The Spanish had brought sugarcane with them from the Canary Islands, and it grew incredibly well in the hot, humid climate of the coastal lowlands, the same areas where cacao thrived. Soon, large plantations, often worked by enslaved African and indigenous laborers, were producing vast quantities of processed sugar. Someone, somewhere, in a convent or a noble's kitchen, had a revolutionary idea. What if they took the bitter cacao paste and, instead of adding trials, they added a generous amount of sugar? The experiment was a revelation. The sugar did not just mask the bitterness of the cacao, it transformed it. It balanced the complex flavors, smoothed out the rough edges, and turned the challenging medicinal drink into a decadent, pleasurable beverage. They also started serving it hot, in the European style, and often added spices they were familiar with, like cinnamon and anise, instead of the native culinary. This new, sweetened, hot chocolate was an immediate sensation among the Spanish colonists. It was still a luxury, but it was a much more accessible and palatable one. It quickly became the fashionable drink of the colonial elite, served in the morning for breakfast or as an afternoon pick-me-up. The xocolātl gourd cups were replaced with delicate porcelain cups imported from China via the Manila galleons. The entire culture around the drink began to shift from a stimulating warrior's elixir to a refined, aristocratic indulgence. From Mexico, this new version of chocolate made its way back to Spain. It arrived in the court of King Philip I in the late 16th century and became an instant obsession among the Spanish aristocracy. For about 100 years, Spain managed to keep chocolate as its own delicious secret. But secrets this good are hard to keep. Through royal marriages and trade, the knowledge of sweetened chocolate eventually leaked out to the rest of Europe. The Italian explorer Antonio Carletti saw it being made in Spain and introduced it to Italy. The daughter of the Spanish king married the French king Louis X and brought her love of chocolate with her to the French court. Once it hit Paris, it exploded. Chocolate became the ultimate symbol of aristocratic luxury and decadence throughout Europe. Chocolate houses, similar to coffee houses, sprang up in London, Paris, and Amsterdam, where the wealthy would gather to drink, gamble, and gossip. Each country put its own spin on it. The French were known for making it rich and smooth. The Dutch developed a method to press the cocoa butter out of the bean, creating a powdered cocoa that was easier to mix and a solid cocoa butter that would become the key to a future invention. There is a small, almost comical detail about this period. As chocolate became more popular in Europe, the demand for cacao beans skyrocketed. However, the Europeans had no idea how to grow it. They were completely dependent on the supply from the Spanish colonies in the Americas. This gave Spain a virtual monopoly on the raw ingredient for centuries, making cacao an incredibly strategic and profitable commodity, the brown gold that funded much of the Spanish Empire. The question of when chocolate shifted from being a drink to something you could eat is a pivotal one in its history. For centuries, it was exclusively a beverage. The invention of the eating chocolate is credited to the Dutch chemist Coenraad van Houten in 1828. He invented a hydraulic press that could efficiently separate the cocoa butter from the cacao solids. This Dutch process had two effects. It created a less fatty cocoa powder that made a smoother drink, and it provided a surplus of cocoa butter. In 1847, the British company J.S. Fry and Sons figured out that if you took this surplus cocoa butter, added it back into some cocoa powder along with sugar, you could create a paste that could be molded into a solid bar. the first modern chocolate bar was born. This invention, followed by the development of milk chocolate by Daniel Peter and Henry Nestle in Switzerland in 1875, completely democratized chocolate. It was no longer a drink for the aristocracy, but a cheap, portable, and delicious solid treat for the masses. The transformation was complete. The bitter, frothy, water-based, chili-spiced drink of your emperor had become a sweet, smooth, milk-based, solid candy bar eaten by children all over the world. You look at a small, rough-textured disc of what is now called Mexican chocolate. It is made simply, in the old style, just cacao paste and sugar, maybe some cinnamon. It is gritty, less refined than the European bars. It is a small taste of that moment of transition, a living fossil from the time when your sacred bitter water first met the seductive sweetness of sugar, beginning a journey that would change the world's palate forever. Centuries have passed. The great city of Tenochtitlan is now buried beneath the sprawling, modern metropolis of Mexico City. The roar of traffic has replaced the gentle lapping of water in the canals. The world of the Aztec Empire, with its floating gardens and warrior priests, feels like a distant dream. And yet, if you look closely, if you taste carefully, you can find the ghost of that world everywhere. It lingers in the food. You walk down a busy street, the air filled with the sounds of a modern city. You are drawn to a small stall, a talk area, where a man is skillfully working a grill. You order a simple taco. He takes a soft corn tortilla, warmed from the griddle. That tortilla is a direct, unbroken link to your past. The masa it is made from was likely nixtamalized, the same ancient chemical process that unlocked the corn's power and made your civilization possible. The rhythmic pat-pat-pat of the tortilla maker may have been replaced by a machine, but the essence of the food remains. He fills the tortilla with grilled meat, perhaps steak or pork, a legacy of the Spanish collision. But then he spoons on a salsa. You look at the bowls of salsa on the counter. One is a vibrant green, made from tomatillo, cilantro, and serrano chiles. Another is a smoky, deep red, made from toasted chipotle peppers. These sauces, in their soul, are purely Aztec. They are the descendants of the sauces ground in a molcajete, using the same chiles that once gave your food its fire. He asks if you want toppings. You see a bowl of guacamole. The avocado, the testicle tree fruit, is mashed with onion, cilantro, and lime, a perfect blend of new and old world ingredients. You see a bowl of frijoles, beans, the humble and essential second sister, the foundational trinity of your ancient diet, maize, beans, and chili, is right here, in your hand, folded into a perfect, portable meal. You think back to the other foods from your journey. The turkey, the xocolātl, is still a centerpiece for holidays, often served in a rich mole sauce that, despite its new ingredients, still carries the DNA of the ancient Mali. The squash blossoms are still considered a delicacy, a seasonal treat stuffed into quesadillas. The smoky corn fungus, xocolātl, is now a gourmet ingredient, sought after by high-end chefs who celebrate its unique, earthy flavor. Even the crunchy chapulines are having a renaissance, served as a trendy, sustainable bar snack in chic cantinas. There is a curious modern echo of the China pans. In the southern part of Mexico City, in a place called Xocolātl, a small remnant of the ancient lake and canal system still exists. Here, you can ride in colorful boats called T-Rage and Iris through the old waterways, past the lust of the working chinampas. For a long time, they were mostly a tourist attraction. But recently, there has been a growing movement among chefs and environmentalists to revive and protect these ancient floating gardens. They are working with local farmers to grow organic, heirloom produce, recognizing that this ancient Aztec technique is a model of incredible sustainability, a potential solution for modern urban farming. It is a small but powerful echo of your past, showing that the old ways still have profound wisdom to offer the modern world. The debate over what constitutes authentic Mexican food continues to be a passionate one. Is it the food of a specific region? Is it the food that uses only pre-Hispanic ingredients? Or is authenticity found in the home cooking passed down through generations, a living tradition that is constantly evolving? The consensus among many modern food scholars is that authenticity is not a static point in the past. It is a river. The river of Mexican cuisine has its source deep in the Aztec world, but it has been fed by many tributaries over the centuries: Spanish, French, Lebanese, and more. The river is always moving, always changing, but its main current still flows from that ancient source. You take a bite of the cacao, the soft corn, the savory meat, the fresh onion, the fiery salsa. It is a symphony of flavors and textures, a perfect food. In that one bite, you can taste the history. You can taste the China MPA gardens on the sacred maize. You can taste the chili that gave its all. You can taste the collision of worlds, the pig that met the corn. You are tasting the resilience of a people and their food, a culinary tradition that was conquered but never defeated, that bent but never broke. It absorbed its invaders' ingredients and made them its own, creating something new, vibrant, and enduring. The ghost of the Aztec world is not in a museum. It is right here, on your plate, a delicious and living memory. And so, our journey through the Aztec pantry comes to a gentle close. The story, which began with the first light over a city on a lake, now settles into the quiet hum of history. The vibrant sounds of the market at Tlatelolco, the rhythmic slap of hands shaping masa, the ceremonial chants before the amaranth idol, they all fade, not into silence, but into a soft, resonant echo. You can feel the warmth of the atoll in your hands, the lingering heat of the chili on your tongue, the complex bitterness of the xocolātl. These are not just flavors, they are memories, sleeping now in the culinary heart of a nation. Let the story drift, like a canoe on a quiet canal, carrying you from the world of waking into the world of dreams. The great volcanoes that once guarded the valley now stand watch over your sleep. The rustle of maize in the field becomes a soft whisper, lulling you into a peaceful rest, a rest filled with the faint, sweet scent of vanilla and the deep, earthy comfort of corn.